U.S. House of Representatives floor debate, September 12, 1984.
Conversation. The gentleman from Arizona.
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to House Resolution 573 just adopted, I move to take from the Speaker's table the Bill H.R. 1437 with a Senate amendment to the text of the bill and agree to the Senate amendment.
The clerk will report the title and the Senate amendment.
H.R. 1437, an act entitled the California Wilderness Act of 1983. Senate amendments. Strike out all after the enacting clause and insert that this title may be cited as the California Wilderness Act of 1984.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to dispense with the reading of the resolution.
Without objection, so ordered. The gentleman from Arizona is recognized for 1 hour, but if the gentleman will suspend briefly, will those members who wish to carry on conversations please retire to the cloakroom for that purpose?
Yeah.
And the House will be in order. The gentleman from Arizona is recognized for 1 hour.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 30 minutes to the gentleman from Alaska for purposes of debate only and reserve 30 minutes of my time. I wish to announce that all the time I shall yield today is for purposes of debate only. I yield myself 3 minutes. There's some good things about this country of ours, Mr. Speaker, and two of them are the national park system, which we started back in 1872 with Yellowstone, and from time to time have added to these crown jewels, Yosemite and Grand Canyon and all of the rest. A second thing that I think is very special about our country is the wilderness system. Both of these are uniquely American ideas, the idea that we would set aside a portion of our natural heritage for future generations. Let me point out that the total acreage in the wilderness system today is 83.5 million acres. This is approximately 4% of the total acreage in America. However, 56.5 million is in Alaska and 27 million in the lower 48. This is 1%, is just over 1% of all the land in the lower 48 states will be in wilderness when we've completed our action today.
I'd want the record to show that this will not end the wilderness debate in California. The same vocal groups will be back wanting more before this ink is dry on the proposal. Mr. Chairman, let me state again, no one can be against wilderness if we know what we do. I'm against the lack of organization, of understanding of where the resources lie that we will need in the future for the future generations. I think it's a sad day again as we sit on this floor, and because of special interest groups and because it's the end thing to do, is to deprive the future generations of the resources of oil and gas, of timber and hydropower and minerals which we import today, which increases the debt upon this great nation of ours, and in fact hurts the employment factor that we are now talking about so much. Mr. Chairman, I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves the balance of his time. The gentleman from Arizona.
Mr. Speaker, I yield for a unanimous consent request to Mr. Fazio of California.
The gentleman from California is recognized for 3 minutes.
I rise in strong support of the measure and request unanimous consent. I be allowed to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the
Speaker,
gentleman yields
I
back.
yield to the gentleman from Ohio, the chairman of the subcommittee that produced this legislation, 5 minutes.
The gentleman from Ohio is recognized for 5 minutes.
I thank the distinguished chairman and the gentleman from Arizona. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman, I rise in support of H.R. 1437 as amended by the Senate. This legislation resolves the Rare 2 issue in California. It is a bipartisan bill supported by both senators from California, and though reduced somewhat in acreage, it is in essence the same bill that passed the House in 3 successive Congresses under the leadership of our late colleague, the Honorable Philip Burton. Mr. Speaker, this bill has been long in the making and is long overdue. I think it's in everyone's interest to settle this issue. We had over in the 3 Congresses in which we worked on it, we heard over 300 witnesses, and while it doesn't satisfy all of the groups in every respect, it seems to me it's a reasonable compromise, and I strongly urge its overwhelming adoption in the House, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Alaska.
Mr. Chairman, how much time did I consume?
The gentleman from Alaska has 27 minutes remaining, and the gentleman from Arizona has 19 minutes remaining.
Okay. At this time, I'll yield 5 minutes to Mr. Dannemeyer from California.
The gentleman from California is recognized for 5 minutes. Without objection.
I'm happy to yield to my friend from California.
Well, I thank the gentleman for yielding. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to state my strong support for H.R. 1437 as amended by the other body and ask unanimous consent to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection.
Thank you.
One has to ask, where does this stop? And in asking that question, really, what does it mean to have a wilderness area? There may be some members in the chamber who don't know that. In a wilderness area, you can walk in it, as long as you get a permit from the appropriate administering federal agency. You can't pick up any rocks. You can fish there. You can't build anything in the facility. It's just there. If a fire happens to start in an area designated as wilderness, even if it happens to be adjacent to a developed area, you can't go in and fight the fire because the proponents of it say it must be natural. I'd be happy to yield if you'll give me some additional time. I'm not yielding at this time.
Well, the gentleman
I'm not
just
yielding
made
at
a
this time.
misstatement of fact.
I'm not yielding at this time. With respect to the matter of insects, you can't spray for any insects in a wilderness area. And as pointed out earlier, I believe that it's going to work. I'm not yielding at this time.
Well,
I thank the gentleman.
made another misstatement.
I'm not yielding at this time. You want to get an area that's in a rundown condition, establish a principle whereby you cannot spray in that particular region designated as a wilderness area.
The gentleman from Arizona.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from California, Mr. Dellum.
The gentleman from California is recognized for 3 minutes.
I'd like to thank the chairman for yielding. And Mr. Speaker, as sponsor of the bill H.R. 2474, which called for the designation of the Tuolumne River as a wild and scenic river, I rise in support of the California Wilderness Bill H.R. 1437. H.R. 2474 received the support of numerous environmental groups and the majority of the California delegation. And I am particularly pleased that the California Wilderness Bill now designates the Tuolumne River as a wild and scenic river. The Tuolumne River Basin contains municipally owned family camps which provide thousands of urban dwellers with a vista of primal California wilderness. And it seems clear as I read the legislative history established in the other body by the two distinguished gentlemen from California that it is not the intent of the legislation, and I concur, that development be undertaken on the North Fork, the Middle Fork, and the South Fork, which would have an adverse impact upon the family camps of Berkeley, Tuolumne, San Jose, Camp Tawonga, and the community of Hardin Flats.
Once again, I believe that the House is faced with a choice of voting up or down on a wilderness bill that, while well-intended, reflects the trendy fantasy that public lands are sacred only to the degree they escape human needs. Once again, I believe that Congress has been relatively insensitive to the views and concerns of many who have large acreage or waterways at stake. Once again, I believe that Congress finds itself on the verge of awarding wilderness victory to the side with the greater passion and the inferior case. Lands managed for many uses are the real national treasure because they can provide a multitude of amenities in perpetuity without impairing environmental considerations or future productivity. I realize that the great majority of members are not directly affected by the California wilderness question, and I realize further that this is an election year and this is an environmental vote, and perhaps a vote which has points with that community that members are seeking. Still, I ask you, as my colleagues, to vote against this specific bill. It is not a memorial issue, and it's not a cheap wilderness issue. We're not going through these motions just to placate our constituents back home or to serve the needs of special interests. This is an issue of fairness concerning real people with real needs. Please don't import forest mismanagement and unemployment into districts such as mine that can ill afford it. The underlying question is not whether wilderness in California is good or bad. It is good. The underlying question is how much wilderness is enough? This bill is far too excessive, and excessive preservation is not conservation.
I believe, as Phil Burton did, that once wilderness is gone, it cannot be replaced. And while we have cited many millions of acres in the wilderness system in this United States, we must remember that there's probably more asphaltic surface in this country than there is wilderness, and that this is little enough to reserve for our own use and our children's use, for scientific endeavor, and for all the various needs of our fisheries, of animal life, of genetic storehouses, that is essential if we are to continue to exist as a civilization as man overpopulates this earth.
Likewise, I support very strongly the language in this compromise which provides needed protection for the Tuolumne River by designating it as a component of the Wild and Scenic River system. This beautiful California waterway depicts an outstanding balance between the numerous competing uses which confront many of our nation's rivers. It currently is a working river with several dams and powerhouses supplying water and power to homes and farms in the San Francisco area. In addition, the undeveloped 83-mile stretch of the river has provided beauty and enjoyment for rafters, hunters, fishermen, and naturalists for hundreds of years. So I'm pleased that the crafters of this significant compromise recognize the need to preserve that river. I agree with the intent of the framers of the compromise that any tributary development on the north, middle, or south forks of the Tuolumne and Clavey rivers should not adversely affect the family camps located on these tributaries.
Mr. Speaker, I have the tremendous pleasure and responsibility of representing two of the three areas in this legislation in their entirety, Mono Lake and that portion of the Tuolumne River to be designated as wild and scenic. With minor technical revisions, the bill before us today incorporates the language of H.R. 5083 and H.R. 1341, which I introduced in the House of Representatives earlier in this Congress. H.R. 5083, now Title II of this bill, is designed to protect the mainstream of the Tuolumne River from further hydroelectric development. At the same time, this language was specifically crafted to acknowledge that the county of origin has never directly benefited from the vast water resources within its boundaries. H.R. 1341, now Title III of this bill, received the unanimous approval of this House over a year ago. It will give national recognition to that jewel of the eastern Sierra Nevada mountains, Mono Lake. At the turn of the century, John Muir described the Mono Basin as a land of frost and fire and fought to add it to Yosemite National Park. We have not achieved John Muir's dream, but we have preserved a holy place for future generations of Americans.
The chair would observe at this point that the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Udall, has 9 minutes remaining, and the gentleman from Alaska, Mr. Young, has 12 minutes remaining. The gentleman from Alaska.
At this time, Mr. Chairman, I will yield 5 minutes to the gentleman from California, Mr. Bashan.
I should like the record to show that what is being done today in the people's name might well become the bellwether of an observation made to me by a constituent. It is his contention that wilderness designation has detrimental environmental impact of the federal estate because it forces all uses of the remaining public lands to become concentrated to an intensity destructive of the land itself. When the remaining lands require protection for the excessive use by a public that demands more and more recreational opportunities, great restrictions will be placed so that to enjoy the multiple use lands managed by the Forest Service, the National Park Service, and the Bureau of Land Management will require permission that will be difficult to obtain. I hope he is wrong, but I am aware of these conflicts already developing.
I'm familiar with this river in large part because of my association with the San Jose Family Camp, one of several such facilities along the Tuolumne. As a member of the San Jose City Council in 1968, I helped negotiate the acquisition of that camp. A few years later, during my term as mayor, the camp was opened and has been serving our community ever since. The Tuolumne offers a place of quiet refuge from the noise and clamor of our modern life and has a majesty and a beauty well worth the protection we are providing it today. Running right down through the middle of the camp is the middle fork of the Tuolumne River, and the river truly is the lifeblood of our camp, and every year over 7,000 people visit the camp and for many, this is their first and only experience in the wilderness.
The gentleman from Alaska.
All right, Mr. Chairman, how much time is left on both sides?
Both sides have 7 minutes remaining.
Mr. Chairman, I yield at this time to the lady from California.
How much time is being yielded?
How much time do you want?
Oh, maybe a minute and a half.
Minute and a half.
The gentlelady is recognized for 90 seconds.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, I rise in strong support of H.R. 1437, the California Wilderness Bill. Although the scope of the bill has been reduced in acreage from that the House had wanted originally to see, it does represent a reasonable compromise. And when this legislation is passed and signed into law, it will provide vital protection for wilderness lands in California. While others will speak today on various portions of the bill, I would like to concentrate my remarks on the Senate's wise inclusion of the Tuolumne River in this legislation.
I represent one of the areas that has been at the heart of this controversy from the very beginning. The counties in and around the Trinity Alps, the Siskiyous, and the Yola-Boli are heavily dependent on the timber, fishing, and tourism industries. Because natural resources play such a major role in our economy, the issue of wilderness is much more than an abstraction on the North Coast. It has been a dominant source of political conflict for over 20 years, and the wilderness controversy only deepens the divisions in the communities that I represent. For this reason, I believe the time has come to put this issue behind us, to provide permanent protection for the finest of our wilderness areas, and to proceed with the development and wise management of the lands available for resource production. Further delay will only prolong the uncertainty over national forest timber supplies, the future of our valuable wilderness lands, and the long-term stability of the local economy.
The gentleman from Alaska.
Mr. Chairman, I have 5 minutes left.
5 1/2 minutes. And the gentleman from Arizona has 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, to put things in perspective, if I may, we hear this is for the future generations. I can suggest to you, my friends, that the future generations are being deprived through actions such as this of those things that we need to maintain our economic and security positions in the world. And I was sitting listening to this debate, and everyone has their opinionated positions on this bill, but what would have happened if Christopher Columbus had arrived on the East Coast and the Sierra Club and the Friends of the Earth and all the other organizations were around? We would have had a fine wilderness, but we would have had no Statue of Liberty, no opportunity, no vast shores and land to give to those poor and unfortunate people. In fact is, if we had this type of action in the Congress, if there was a Congress at that time, let's see, in 1776 and 1778 and 1800 we had this type of action. Would we be able to, as we've just announced yesterday, to take in the prisoners in Vietnam or other areas of the world and give them the opportunity, such as from Ireland and Italy and France and Germany and Russia and England? Would we have the opportunity to, yes, give a position for those that come from the Hispanic-speaking nations? I say no. And I'm suggesting respectfully that the actions we take on this floor with every wilderness bill, we are not considering the future generations. We're not giving the hopes and dreams to them as the people that came into these shores had an opportunity for land, an opportunity for advancement, an opportunity for freedom. Because when we take government land that is already owned by the people and then reclassify it by an act of Congress into a restrictive classification, we deprive the people from the utilization of those lands and the benefit they can achieve from those lands. And so we say this with great shining armor, that this is a great act for the future generations. I say that is not true. If we were honest with ourselves, we would say we must study the wilderness. We must know what lies under the ground and what is above the ground and what are the needs for the future generations. Oh, I know on that side of the aisle, and some of those special interest groups will tell you, when we need them, we will go get them. Who's the we? I'll tell you who the we is. It's the United States government, and that may sound good, Mr. Chairman, to many people, but I'll tell you, if you believe in the environment, The United States government is the most dangerous of all the people that violate the environment. It is the private sector that does the best job, and it can be regulated by this Congress, which we have done. Mr. Chairman, I urge my colleagues to oppose this bill, if knowing full well the votes are not there, but go down in history of standing for the future, not the selfish present, but for the future. And let us be managers of the land. Let us not make the mistakes, but let us manage the lands as we should and give the opportunity to the future generations.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Arizona.
I yield 1 minute to the gentlelady from California, Mrs. Boxer.
The gentlelady from California is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am pleased to add my voice in support of the California Wilderness Bill. This legislation will add magnificent acres of national forest lands to the nation's wilderness system to be protected forever. In addition, H.R. 1437 designates the Tuolumne as a wild and scenic river. I have been on the Tuolumne with my family and several of my colleagues, and it is indeed wild and magnificent. My fear as I rafted down that river was that my grandchildren would never have that opportunity. Now my fears will be unfounded as we pass this great legislation. I am also pleased that this legislation protects the family camps located on the tributaries of the Tuolumne and ensures that any development activity not adversely affect the camps. I am proud to join with my colleague from San Francisco, Sala Burton, who has worked so tirelessly for this bill. She's doing it because she cares about the environment, and she's doing it as a legacy to her great husband, Philip. And I'm also proud to stand with our two senators from both political parties in support of this legislation.
The gentlelady's time has expired. The gentleman from Arizona has 2 minutes remaining.
I yield the remaining time to the gentlelady from California, Mrs. Burton.
The gentlelady is recognized for 2 minutes.
I won't take the whole 2 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. H.R. 1437 is a product that bears the imprint of many contributors and supporters. Senators Cranston and Wilson were truly outstanding in their attempts to achieve a settlement of this long-standing dispute, and I applaud their negotiating skills and tireless efforts in reaching this goal. Chairman Udall of the full Interior Committee and Chairman Seiberling of the Subcommittee on Public Lands and National Parks were superb in their attention, energy, and leadership they devoted to this cause. I'd also like to commend the California members who were active, Rick Lehman, Bosco, everyone, and if I miss a name, it's because I'm a little bit fatigued. I've worked a little hard on this thing, in not only supporting this initiative, but in shaping its contents. I also want to say something about our colleague Tony Coelho, who had reservations on certain parts of this bill, yet worked with us and voted for the rule, and I'm most appreciative. And I furthermore must thank the Republican members that were active in helping us shape this bill. I particularly want to mention my dear friend, Congressman Lagomarsino, who was most helpful, and the members who spoke and helped us on this bill on the Republican side are Congressman Xiao, Congressman Lowry, Congressman Duncan, and Congressman Bobby Fiedler, who spoke earlier and was a supporter of this bill. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the people who work in the various offices to really make this thing tick. I cannot thank them enough. The staffs of Congressman Udall, Seiberling, and the staffs in the Senate. I also would like to particularly thank the environmental groups in the state of California and this nation. They did a yeoman's work. Some of them are up in the gallery and probably enjoying this moment.
The gentlelady has expired.
Thank you.
All time has expired. Pursuant to House Resolution 573, the previous question is ordered. The question now comes on the motion of the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Udall, that the Senate amendments be agreed to. Those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair...
Mr. Chairman.
What purpose does the gentleman rise?
Mr. Speaker, I object to the vote on the ground that a quorum is not present and make a point of order that a quorum is not present.
The gentleman's point of order is well taken. Obviously, a quorum is not present. The ayes and noes are automatic. The question is on agreeing to the Senate amendments. Those who are in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. And voting will be by electronic device. Accordingly, the Senate amendment to the text of the bill is agreed to. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table, and also without objection, the Senate amendment to the title is agreed to. For what purpose does the gentleman from Arizona rise?
Mr. Speaker, I have at the desk a concurrent resolution, and I ask unanimous consent for its immediate consideration.
We'll report the concurrent resolution, but the clerk will suspend.